Hey everyone, welcome to the Living Enviado podcast. And I just want to say Merry Christmas, or depending on what side of the pond you're on, Happy Christmas. So I know we've got listeners in the UK. I know we've got listeners here in other parts of the world. And I just want to thank you for listening. I mean, this is our first year to do this podcast. This is episode number 32. This will be our last episode of the year, so it'll be just a little shorter than the rest of them. Because I want to talk about just something about Christmas, but I also want to give you a heads up about what's around the corner. So we've actually got episodes in the hopper, and I'm also, so we're going to push those into January, I guess early February. And I'm also working on trying to get some interviews with some special people. One of them being a guy who was imprisoned in North Korea, a believer, a missionary. Someone who has gone through and survived the North Korean prison. So hopefully, Lord willing, I've gotten a word from him that he's interested. Now I'm just trying to keep the communication going because it's not that easy in terms of his specific circumstances. So Lord willing, sometime next year in 2026, we'll have this interview with a guy who was in North Korean prison. So as we talk about this Christmas and what it means to live Enviado and live sin, just kind of like the ending words for the year, you might say. I don't know if that's really a thing, but let's just call it a thing. And let's just, anyways, let me get into it. Let me be upfront with you. I love the trappings of Christmas. I love Santa Claus movies. I have my favorite movies. My wife has her favorite movies, just some traditional Christmas movies, some newer movies, some even corny ones like Red One, which I do like. I actually watched it for the first time last year. I love it. It's a little corny, but I think it's good. But we have other movies we like to watch. We love the Christmas trees. We love the decorations. I just love this time of year. And I'm not ashamed of it. I have Christian friends who are kind of the anti-Santa Claus, anti-anything that's not birth of Jesus stuff. And I get that, okay? I do. I understand it. I'm okay with it. But I love all of it. I really do. And I'm not ashamed of it, okay? Now, we don't deck out our house in some gaudy Christmas stuff, but, we do what we can to put some lights out. And of course, we have a manger scene outside, and of course, we have a couple of Christmas trees on the inside and things like that. Moving into South Carolina, I never knew anyone who had more than one Christmas tree until I moved here. And then I see people who've got 5 to 10 Christmas trees in their house. We've moved up to 2, okay? We've actually got 3. Sorry, my in-laws live with us. So we have 3 Christmas trees in our house. 1 for them, 2 for us. We'll probably keep the 3 going long into the future. But I do want to talk about something related to Christmas, because in this month, I've been helping some of my colleagues in my day job find some resources to help them with their Christmas projects. And we are hosting a Nepali college kid in our house for the next, it's already been a half a week. So another 2.5 weeks, he's with us celebrating Christmas. I work with his dad. I've worked with his dad for a number of years. So his dad has never been to the U.S., but his son was able to get a visa, and he came to be an international student at a Christian college. I won't say where, but at a Christian college. So he's here. He had to leave. He didn't have any place to go. So of course, we'd love to have him come with us. So having him here and realizing before he even got here to South Carolina, before he got to our house, even though I knew him, I knew the kid, he's never celebrated Christmas in the United States. And he's never celebrated Christmas in South Carolina, for that matter. And so I knew that the experience was going to be a little different. Now, granted, he's seen some Christmas movies, and so he's kind of seen how Americans in general might celebrate it and kind of the big fanfare we make of it. Because I do recognize that when he's back in his home country of Nepal, they don't celebrate Christmas in the same way, okay? There may be some overlap, but there's some stark differences. And so one of the things, even though my church is very heavy in doing ministry year round, and they're very supportive of ministries that are doing events during the Christmas season. In fact, they're talking about an event in another country I won't name of coming alongside our partner over there, and they've done this every year for years of just helping them during this time of Christmas. Of course, they do the Samaritan's Purse Christmas boxes. A lot of you are probably familiar with that, and they do a number of things. But in reality, life here in the U.S., in the West, is super crazy during this time of year. You've got company Christmas parties, you've got ministry Christmas parties, you've got church Christmas parties, you've got small group Christmas parties, you've got Christmas parties galore. And they tend to be more ministry minded over in Nepal. And so I just started thinking, like, what would I want to think about? So I read this statement the other day, like, if Jesus was born today, like he was born in the same way that he was born 2,000 years ago, but he was born in 2025. And we were obviously alive while he was born right now, coming to earth. Like, what would we think? What would we embrace? Would we embrace him? I mean, let's be honest. If we were to put ourselves back into that scenario 2,000 years ago, would we be the ecstatic, pro-Christ, pro-birth, death and resurrection story? Would we be that person? Or would we be the naysayers? I mean, there's plenty of naysayers. Have you ever thought about that? So as we get into Christmas, and it's so easy for us because we've got, let's think about it, 2,000 years roughly of historical groups of people working in their minds, working through the evidence of Christ, working through the evidence of his birth, his death, his resurrection, and we got almost 2,000 years after all that, and it's easier in many ways to believe the story and to embrace the story. Granted, there's many people who don't, and there's many people who find it very challenging to embrace it. I get it. I'm not speaking to them, but for those of you who do, it is easier for us because we've had a history of people going through the evidence, seeking to prove it wrong. In fact, they were able to prove it right, and so on and so forth. Kind of like Lee Strobel, if you ever read his books, Faith for Christ, Case for Faith, Case for Christ. I believe maybe Case for the Bible, something like that. He's case for many subjects. He was an atheist trying to prove Christ to be wrong and not real, and in fact became one of his biggest advocates for the gospel. Let's try to put ourselves in that situation, because Christmas, while I do love the trappings, I do love the movies, I do love the parties, I love the cookies, I love the presents. I love giving presents. I absolutely love that part. Christmas isn't about the movies, okay? Christmas isn't about the shows we put on church. And I just saw a video of one out of a big church I will not name, but I wasn't surprised when I found out the name of the church. And just the production, and great production quality was great, but it was a little weird. It was just weird. Anyways, it's not about the Christmas shows. It's not about the Christmas parties. It's not about the gifts. It's not about giving the gifts or even receiving the gifts, because I love receiving gifts too. It's not about any of that. It is centrally, exclusively about Christ. I mean, we can do all those things and it's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing those things. We can enjoy them. I don't think there's a problem with enjoying the trappings. We can have the Christmas Eve services. Okay, but if we don't really focus on what does it mean to be about Christ, is it just us focusing on Christ and his birth and just thinking about it? Because I don't really think that's what God has in mind, that we just sit there and it's kind of like a remembrance thing. Like we just remember what Christ did, why he came. Okay, all that is legit, all that we should do, we should never forget, but is at the end. And then we get into the trappings. I'll argue any day, every day, all year, all century. Well, my entire life, it is not. Because Christmas, Easter, death, resurrection, birth, death, resurrection, all those things, and even beyond those things, the life in between those two events of Christ's life, it's all about him. Our life is about him. We would not be alive if it wasn't for him. John 1:1. Okay, John chapter 1. Did I say John 1:1? So John chapter 1, let's forget John 1:1. The whole chapter. Let's just think about the whole chapter. It states Jesus is God. it states Jesus is the creator. Okay, Jesus was involved. You have the Holy Father, the Holy Son, the Holy Spirit. You have the Trinity, the three in one. God is one. It's God it's the Trinity. And together as one, they created the entire universe. They created me. They created you. They created our families. They created our thoughts, our thinking, our gifts, our skills, our everything that we have. Even the beauty, as I've driven around my county the last couple of weeks, just seeing the beauty of some of the places and thinking, God created this. God created that. We wouldn't have any of it without him. And so when we think about Christmas, it isn't just remembering, which is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. It's a great thing. And we absolutely should remember everything God has done for us. But if we stop there, are we really worshiping God? Are we really worshiping through this season, through this Christmas season? I'll argue, I don't know. I'll just say no. Okay. We're kind of halfway there if that's all we're doing. But if we want to fully worship God, then it takes more than just remembering what he did, remembering why he came to this earth. And not just came to this earth, but came to earth in such a humble way. When I talk about humble, I'm not talking about the act of humility. Well, I guess it really was an act of humility, but a humble and just like a low society way. I guess I don't even know if I'm really wording it correctly, but he was king. He's the Lord. He's the master. And yet he comes into a manger in a stable, surrounded by stinky animals that have probably pooped everywhere, and it just probably reeks in there. And yet that's where he was born. We like to make it tidy and probably put potpourri around it and kind of make it smell nice. We like to, beautify the situation, but I don't think it was that beautiful of a situation other than the fact that God came to earth, and that's what made it beautiful. Okay. And so we've got this situation, and not to mention just where he was born, but he was born of a woman who is married to Joseph, who was conceived before they could consummate the marriage. Okay. Now, again, imagine yourself in that situation. Now, of course, in 2025, we don't often care as much about people who get pregnant out of wedlock. I mean, there's sometimes a little bit of tension, but we tend to be a little bit over it a lot quicker than people were back 2,000 years ago when it was just the end of the world when someone did that. And then you've got Mary impregnated with God himself and through supernatural means. I mean, just think about it. Yes, I know it's true. I believe it's true. But man, I can see why people 2,000 years ago struggled with that. But anyways, let's keep going. So we have this scenario of him coming to this earth, and he's the creator, he's the Messiah, and he's bringing light to us. I mean, he didn't bring universal salvation. Let's just lay all the cards out. He didn't just because he came, and of course, eventually, as we get into Easter, his death and resurrection, that didn't just automatically apply universal salvation to everyone, but he came to give us a way out of the death and hell that we all deserve. I mean, we do deserve it. Okay, yes, God is love. But it also says that we were by nature, when Paul was talking about to the believers, we were by nature at one time objects of God's wrath, and that was pre-Christ. That was before salvation. That was before we were washed with the blood of the Lamb, by the blood of the Lamb, because of Christ, when we repented and turned to him, and then the wrath was released from us. Okay, those who are not born again are facing that wrath, not because we want them to face it, but because Scripture says they're facing it. And that's why we share the story of Christ. That's why we share not just the birth of Christ, but that's why we talk about the death of Christ and, of course, the resurrection of Christ. See, all three of those things go hand in hand, even at Christmas time. You see, the kid that's staying with us from Nepal, his father right now, as I'm recording this, is going out into challenging places to host Christmas events, but not just fun Christmas trapping Christmas events. He's hosting Christmas events with one goal: proclaim the gospel. He wants the people he's going to go to, largely in communities that have very limited access to the gospel. And I'm not talking about South Carolina access to the gospel. I'm talking about people who go day in and day out and may never meet one Christian person. He will likely not have one relationship with a Christian, one friendship with a Christian. And yet he's going into these places that in some cases don't want him there to preach the gospel, to proclaim. And we use the word preach, and some people are like, I don't like that word preach. Well, if you talk about the gospel, you're preaching the gospel. If you share the gospel, you are preaching the gospel. And by the way, if you like to use the word good news because you think gospel has this bad connotation to it and it's just, it just doesn't sound right, or maybe it's too harsh. Well, guess what? Good news is the literal translation of gospel. So whatever word you want to use, good news, gospel, message of Christ, I don't care, but we have to be preaching the gospel. And that's what this kid's father is out there doing right now. I helped them get some funds over there, and then our friends in the Middle East are throwing a big Christmas party very, very soon, and they're expecting hundreds of people to show up, mostly believers. But they're in a country that is 0.005% Christian. Okay, and they're sharing, and they're in there to encourage the believers because there are so few of them compared to the millions, the tens of millions that the population represents. And they're also inviting non-believers. So they're inviting non-believers to the party, and they're expecting a lot of them to show up, and they're going to give out gifts, and they're going to talk about why they give out gifts, and they're going to do all the trappings of Christmas parties. But they're going in there to share the gospel. And you see, that's what I want to talk about, because this Christmas season, this is like prime time of sharing the gospel. Now, it's not the only time to share the gospel. It's not the only time to try and stir a conversation toward a gospel conversation with your friends, coworkers, neighbors, or family members. But it is a probably out of the entire year, if you were to compare it to other events of the year, apart from maybe Easter, Christmas and Easter probably go hand in hand, but Christmas might be a little bit easier in some respects. At least that's been my experience. A little bit easier in sharing the gospel. When I lived in China, the very first Christmas, actually, it wasn't my first Christmas in China because I actually spent several Christmases there before actually living there. But my first Christmas in China, living in China, we got together with some of our friends, our Christian friends, Chinese friends, and they wanted to do a Christmas party. So we're like, okay, let's invite a bunch of students over. Let's go buy some gifts. So I went and was able to muster up some funds from abroad because I wanted to get a gift. Now, I didn't buy a westernized gift. Okay, I bought a Chinese-made Chinese gift. I mean, it was a piece of art. Okay, it was a Chinese artistic piece of work. It was handmade by a person who was born a Muslim but became a believer, a follower of Jesus. And this person made these pieces for each individual person by hand. So not only get to support her work during kind of the low season of her business, but we got to give them a gift that represented the gospel because it was gospel kind of focused on the gift, but it was a beautiful piece of art that they could hang up and look at and be reminded of what they heard at the party. So we gave them this gift. We explained why we were giving gifts and how the gift relates to Christ coming as our eternal gift. And we got to share the gospel with dozens and dozens of college students who are mostly Buddhist or non-religious, and many of them got to hear the gospel for the very first time and then connect with local believers. So I find Christmas time is one of the best times to connect with people and one of the best times when they're open to hearing the gospel because they're used to hearing about Christmas. They're used to hearing Christmas songs that are Christian related. They're used to hearing the Christmas message in many cases, and not in all, but obviously where I tend to work with people, that's not always the case. But the cool thing is that in those places, they're familiar with Christmas. And so when our teams go in, the people I work with go in and they start doing Christmas events, they're going in part to learn what Christmas is all about. And they're open, whether they're Muslim, Hindus, Buddhists, Sikh, Baha'i, whatever. They're actually more open to hearing the gospel because they're open to hearing about what Christmas is. And granted, here in the South, okay, I know the dynamics are different, so people are used to hearing these things. but I still find people are more open. And so I just want to encourage you, just like my friends are doing in the Middle East and in South Asia and in other parts of the world, I would just challenge you. Find a way to integrate the gospel into your conversations. And one way is to do what I call a God statement of just as you're conversing with people, just throw out things about God. It could be like, what are you doing for Christmas? Well, one of the things I'm doing is I'm going to a Christmas Eve service at my church. That's a God statement, and it stops right there. It's not, oh, I'm going to my church. And let me tell you about, what we're going to do. And you just start preaching the gospel. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay, God statements helps you find the people who are interested in actually hearing the gospel. Okay, I use this all the time in China to see who is interested. I didn't force it on anyone because usually when people are interested, they want to keep the conversation going. I've done it on airplanes. I've done it. I've even been shut down by people. And when I'm shut down by people, they don't want to hear it. I'm not going to force it. Okay, I'm not going to say, you've got to listen to me because I'm here. No, it's just a simple statement. And it's like going fishing. It's like bait. Are they biting or are they not? You're looking for the fish who are biting. That's the metaphor I'm using. I would just encourage you, throw out bait. Throw out things about your life that you're doing. Sure, throw in, we're also doing a Christmas party at my house and we're going to sing some carols like, Joy to the World or Oh Come All You Faithful. You could throw out names of Christmas songs and just see how they respond. Maybe they want to come. Maybe they want to come to your church. Maybe if you're talking about a small group Christmas party, maybe they're interested in coming to that. And if they are, please don't deny them. I would encourage you, don't say, well, they're part of my small group. I can't invite them. No, prep your small group for their arrival. And tell them that, explain who this person is that's coming. Let them know. Don't be, again, a Bible beater where you're hitting them overhead with the Bible. Don't be that person, but use the opportunity to share the gospel. Use the opportunity to find a way to naturally insert the gospel. You have to be intentional, but you don't have to be a Bible beater either. Sorry, my tongue was getting tied. And so I would just encourage you to do that as you're going through this Christmas season. Now, I want to end this. Like I said, this is going to be short-ish. Yes. I want to give you some examples of ways outside of what I just shared of how you can live Enviado in your community that could help propel the gospel message in your own city and town and community. Yeah, we'll just say community. One way is to go to a homeless shelter. Go to a homeless shelter, go to a food bank, go to a soup kitchen. We've got all those where we live. In fact, I was just at a breakfast this morning with a bunch of ministry leaders, and it was amazing how many people are involved in working with homeless, people who are addicts, people who are coming out of prison, people who are pregnant, homeless and pregnant. I was just amazed at the type of ministries that are here locally where I'm at that are serving those populations. And those are great ways that you can reach out and say, hey, are you guys doing anything that I could be involved and see if there's any of them that need volunteers or need help in those areas. Some of them are going to say no. Maybe if they don't know you well enough, they might say no, but maybe they just have too many volunteers. But with that said, just keep reaching out. Those are options. Most decent-sized communities have them. I recognize not every town has stuff like that, but many decent-sized towns and smaller cities, and especially larger cities, have things like that to do. But definitely places like the soup kitchen and food banks and homeless shelters, those places tend to need a lot of help a lot of the time because they tend not to have as many, especially if you live in a very cold environment. If you live in a very cold environment, there's a lot of need. So that's one way. And as you're in those places, try to stir up conversations. Be intentional. If it works, great. If it doesn't, don't beat yourself over the head. You tried. But just be the hands and feet of Christ, but be intentional about verbalizing the gospel message as best as you can. If you don't know how to do that, ask your pastors at your church, hey, can you help me? Find someone in your church. I guarantee there's someone in your church who knows how to do it, and they're good at it, and they're gifted at it, and they can help you. So find that person and say, hey, can you teach me how to quickly share the gospel? What do you do? There's lots of methods out there. I'm not going to get into the methods. I have the one I use. I have friends that use different ones. Methods are just methods. But just conversing with them and trying to show that you care about them, opens the door for the gospel message. Okay, find another way of living Enviado this Christmas. Find a gospel worker in another country. Go to your church. Find out if there's one you can connect with, a partner. If they don't have one, because there's lots of churches who don't partner internationally, there's probably somewhere within a 2 or 3 degree relationship from you that has a connection. They know somebody who knows somebody that can help you connect. Just like my friends overseas who needed help with raising funds. There's lots of gospel workers who may need help just crossing the finish line of raising resources that can help them share the gospel in some very, very difficult places or in non-difficult places. Okay, not every missionary is in a death-defying location. Some missionaries are in places where they're not afraid to step out of their house. They don't have to be concerned about their family's physical lives when they're sharing the gospel. Okay, it's there's both and, but either or, wherever they're at, find a gospel worker who you can come alongside and financially help and pray for, and hopefully that'll stir a relationship that you can get to know them even better over time, get on their newsletters and pray for them more often, and find ways that even in the future you could be part of what God is doing through them. Because let me tell you, irregardless of what the missionaries are doing in the field, they can't do it without you. They can't do it without people holding the ropes and helping them facilitate those projects and those ministry efforts. It is never the sole responsibility of the missionary on the field to do all the work. They need people like you. They need people who stay behind, who are not designed to go abroad, but designed to stay local. They need people like you to step up to the plate and lower them down with a rope and hold their rope while they're there so they can facilitate ministry in difficult, challenging places. It demands and requires both. And both sides of the rope are equally responsible for the effects of the gospel work. Nobody but Christ can take sole credit. And the last thing you can do, I'm just listening 3 things, of course, I shared about the Christmas party thing, but use this gift idea, this idea of giving gifts and why we give gifts. I hope you give gifts more than just because it's a tradition. I hope you give gifts at Christmas time because that's what Christ gave us. That He gave us the greatest gift of all time, Himself. He gave us the greatest gift of all time, His salvation, His forgiveness, His mercy, His grace. So let's use that. Let's recognize that, embrace that, and share that with the people we love, our family, our friends, our coworkers, somebody. It doesn't have to be everybody, but pray and identify someone and see how you can give them a gift and how you can actually use that gift-giving moment to share the gospel with them. Use it. Tell them why you're giving them a gift. Just don't say, I'm just giving it to you because you gave me one, or I'm giving it to you because it's tradition. Don't do that. Use the opportunity to say, I'm giving you the gift because. They'll listen. 9.9999% of the time, I guess out of 10 times, not percent, but out of 10 times, they will listen out of courtesy. Some people are ready to hear it. Some people are just going to be nice and okay, let that person say their piece and we'll all move on. There'll be those too, but at least you shared it. At least you did it. The more you do it, the easier it becomes, the easier it is to do it. And the more often you'll remember ahead of time to just say, let's do this again and see how it goes, because you never know. I got an email. This is the you never know. I got an email the other day. In fact, I sent it out. I do a newsletter every week on the ministry side, and I sent this message out to the people who are on this newsletter, and I shared a story about a girl. So when we lived in China, we had a guy named Jason come and work with us a couple of times. A couple of times over the 4 years we were there. And one of those times he met this girl, and of course he got to share the gospel with her, and she ultimately became a believer. Well, the cool thing is they hadn't heard from each other in years, and the girl over in China had been trying to find, contact information, find him on Facebook, whatever. Couldn't find him. Eventually came across a random email that had his email address in it, and so she reached out to him. And we got to hear that even in the moment, all we knew is that she became a believer, but we got to learn the history of what's happened in the last, I think it's now been 12 or 13 years since that meetup. We got to hear through the ministry God had given us in China that this girl had led her husband to Christ. Well, who is her husband now? She got to lead her parents to Christ. She got to lead her siblings to Christ. And they've been able to lead other family members to Christ. And now she's studying for some important work, secular style work that she wants to use to engage with people, to be able to present the gospel to more people. All this because we took a little bit of time to find a way to share the gospel. You never know what's going to result of it. Even if the person denies. I shared the gospel with a guy from China for about a whole year here in the U.S., and he kept rejecting, but he would talk with me. Okay, I wasn't beating him with the Bible, as he's got to listen to me. He wanted to listen to me, and he asked to talk about it, but he kept rejecting it. Years later, I get an email from him, and he tells me, "Thank you for meeting with me. I know I kept rejecting the gospel back then, but I just wanted you to know I finally believed it, and I've led my entire family to Christ." So use the opportunity to use gifts to connect with people and share with them why you give gifts at Christmas time. What's the eternal meaning behind gift giving? And use it to share the gospel. Because like I said, you never know. With that said, I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas or Happy Christmas. And I want to thank you for walking with me on this journey as I've started this podcast this year. I'm excited about what's coming around the corner. Again, we've got some interviews that I've recorded already this year that have just been a little bit delayed in getting out because we've had to get other stuff out that were more time sensitive. But we've got some incredible episodes coming up in early January into February. And Lord willing, that interview with a guy who was imprisoned in North Korea and some others. We're working on some others as well. And so stick with us. Invite your friends to join and follow us. Please share this podcast with your family and friends in your church. Help people to know about us. The more people that know about us, the more people we can help challenge to go out there and live Enviado, because that's exactly what we want to see done. We want the whole church, the global church, living sent, living Enviado in every aspect of society. So again, thank you for listening and watching this year. I'll see you next year on the podcast. And just remember this, as I've always said in the past: live bold, live courageous, and live Enviado.